Can you see numbers of like
Not
people?
at all. Nope. So I'm wondering if we just begin.
I'm just looking to see.
7 participants are in right now
Oh, great.
at the bottom.
Where is
Okay.
that? Good.
So we're just going to wait a few seconds to see if anyone else joins, and we're going to get started shortly. Thanks for joining. Steph, I'm wondering if we might just get started because I see that our numbers aren't jumping up.
Great.
At this point. So good evening, everyone. My name is Vicki Holan, and I'm here with my colleague, Stephanie King. We're both secondary learning support consultants with the board, which means that our job is to help support schools with special education needs that they might have for their students or for the school in general. So we'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone joining us for this session tonight. Our goal is to provide an overview and understanding of special education supports available to students in the OCDSB and to help guide families and caregivers about how to access supports in high school. For some people in the audience, you may have already started on this journey in elementary school, and for others, you may be here because you would like to be prepared should any issues arise once your child's high school path is started. We hope that our session today will give you a good basic understanding of where to start when you have concerns about your child's learning and to help you know who is there to support you with any questions about your child's academic and social emotional learning needs. We will invite questions at the end of the session, and we're going to ask that you ask those through the chat if possible. There is a Q&A function that we think you have access to, but we will guide you towards the chat at this point. So we'll get started. So the first slide here just helps provide a bit of history and context for our school board's approach to supporting all students in the district. The OCDSB has a strong commitment to human rights, equity, and inclusion. And we believe that everyone can succeed in a culture of high expectations when we support the whole child, when we ensure equity, when we work together, and when we listen and honor and value student and caregiver voice. The document that's just there, the picture that's there, the Learning for All document is the foundational document in Ontario, which helps kind of structure and provide guidance for schools around supporting the needs of all learners within the province. So that document is available publicly, as is the next one. So on the next slide, this is where we get into the specific approach of the school board around special education. And again, this is a public document that exists on the website for the school board. So you can take a look at greater depth if you want by accessing it there. Basically outlines the philosophy and approach for how we support students with special education needs in all of our schools and programs. And the fundamentals of it are that our education system in Ottawa and the OCDSB is based on the principle of inclusion. We offer a range of programs and services with placement options ranging from regular class placements to specialized program classes to special education schools within the school board. Our goal is to help every student meet their full potential in the most inclusive setting possible. And we use a team approach when supporting students, which includes students themselves, parents, caregivers, and school staff as well. So we're going to shift to a little bit more specific detail now about how those layers of support for a student happen. All support for students begins in the classroom. It's at the base level of that triangle where teachers are getting to know their students and observing and monitoring their progress. Teachers begin to get a picture of their students' strengths and needs, and assessment of students for, as, and of learning is ongoing. So when teachers observe that students may be experiencing challenges, they make adjustments to help support their students in their classrooms. This, in a nutshell, is what we sometimes call differentiation of instruction and assessment. So if classroom level interventions are not seeming to be enough for a student to find success, a teacher may reach out to members of the school team. So this is where we jump up to that tier 2, that next level in the triangle. So they'll reach out to the school team for their input and expertise around how to move forward to support a student. And typically this level of support involves additional assessments and close monitoring of student progress as different things are being tried and teachers are gathering more and more information. Depending on the needs of the student, support at this school-based level might include things like literacy skill building programs, numeracy programs, social skills programs, just to give you a sense of what types of things might be tried at that school-based level or tried and suggested at that level. Our highest level of support for a student involves our central staff. Staff in schools will access the support of our central staff teams through something called a multidisciplinary team meeting. This is where people like our school psychologists, speech pathologists, social workers, and others come together to provide their input and recommendations regarding supports for a student. It's really important to know that parent consent is always needed to access this level of support. And on that note, I'd also like to say that at every level shown by this diagram, parent and student voice are an essential component. It's really about good communication and collaboration between all parties involved. So the school, parents, caregivers, students, and other professionals as well. Now, Stephanie is going to help paint a picture of who's available to support your students' learning needs when they come to high school.
Thanks, Vicki. So when we're having students who have special education support needs in a secondary school, the first person who's always going to be involved with that individual is going to be the classroom teacher, which Vicki did reference earlier. That classroom teacher is going to get to know their students' needs and strengths, communicate and collaborate with the families regarding progress, concerns, successes, apply best practices to meet the needs of all the students in their class, know and utilize the IEP to support student learning in the classroom, and if needed and concerns arise, they will seek support from the learning support teacher, the multidisciplinary team with parental consent, if needed. So we move from there on to the learning support teacher, often referred to as the LST. The LST is going to manage the educational and administrative needs of the students. They are going to set up and attend IPRC meetings for transition, including SIA or special education equipment transfers, which can be specialized seating or desks. It can also be technology, but those don't get transferred from school to school. They're going to deal with IEPs, consultations, and development. Monitor and support students within a resource room if they have resource time or if they need resource support. And that will include extra time, scribing, those kinds of accommodations. They're going to consult and assist classroom teachers and work with the admin to organize the in-class or resource room support. We're also going to have some educational assistants within the school, often referred to as EAs. They work with the classroom teacher to support the planning and organizing of programs related to behavioral, social, or instructional programming. They're going to assist students with physical, medical, or safety needs in order to access the curriculum. We also have in the schools the guidance counselors. The guidance counselors are going to provide counseling for students in the area of education, career, and personal growth. They assist with recommendations and referrals to central and outside agencies through the multidisciplinary team when needed. Some students, but not all, may access a student success teacher, often referred to as SST. These teachers are there for students who are at risk in their credit accumulation. They're having difficulty attaining their credits, and they are there to help with time management, organization, and just general support for those individuals, as well as provide tiered support, some credit intervention, credit rescue, and credit recovery, which are all just ways that we try to get credits that a student is currently not being successful with to try to help them become successful with them. From there, we move on to centralized supports. So there's a whole group of support at the central team. And the ones that are bolded on here are members of a multi-D team or a multidisciplinary team. So when we were saying if they need further support, they go to the multi-D team. Those are the people that sit at those tables that would participate in discussions to help put into place steps that are going to assist with whatever challenge is being faced. So we have professional support staff, like psychologists, social workers, speech language pathologist, board certified behavioral analysis, occupational therapist. We have some educational supports, learning support consultants like Vicki and I, and a whole bunch of different itinerant teachers, blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, assistive technology, often called ITATs, social emotional learning teachers, ASD, LD or learning disability itinerant teachers, and inclusion teachers were newly added. We have support staff, itinerant educational assistants, central educational assistants, and an applied behavior analysis coordinator that are going to support the schools. And we also have administrative support. We have the superintendent of learning support services, we have system principals, and we have the manager of learning support services. I think we're going to pass it to Vicki. Vicki, for this slide.
My space bar has been malfunctioning at will. So sorry about that. I was thinking I was unmuted, but I wasn't. So what do you do when you're concerned about your child's learning in high school? The best place to start with is always with your child's teacher. In grade 9, students will have up to 8 teachers per year. So 8 courses typically in grade 9, 8 teachers. Most schools will have a meet the teacher night or an open house early in the school year. This is a great opportunity for parents to start conversations with their child's teacher. Parent-teacher interviews, which typically happen after the first report card, and other forms of more daily communication like email, sometimes Google Classroom. A lot of teachers use Google Classroom and send out weekly updates. These are all ways that you can connect and be informed about your child's progress in school. And there's always just a good old telephone call. So teachers, just remember, are the first layer of support for your child's individual education needs. But as Steph just painted the picture of, there are loads of other staff members who may be able to help, including most closely to the teachers, the learning support teacher in high school, the guidance counselor. For some families, the support of the multicultural liaison officer is an important support. And then finally, the administrators of the school, and this is the principal and the vice principals. So if you think to our triangle model of support that was earlier in the presentation, when appropriate programming strategies and interventions have been tried, and there's clear evidence that even with teacher-led accommodations within the classroom, with additional information that's gathered through assessment, then sometimes an IEP might be considered. The next slide's going to go into the IEP and what that is. The IEP, some of you might be familiar with this already, is the individual education plan. Oh, I'm seeing a pause, Steph? Okay, keep going. Okay, so the IEP is a written plan that outlines the support strategies and interventions needed by a student to access curriculum. It helps school staff understand a student's individual strengths and needs. It lists accommodations, including instructional, environmental, and assessment accommodations, and it provides a plan for transitions of all kinds, including school year to school year. So for example, grade 8 to grade 9, that's captured in a student's IEP. It may look a little bit different from your child's elementary IEP if your child has one. And this is a lot to do with the fact that at high schools, we don't modify as much. So there tends to be a little bit of a different look to the IEP for a student. As Steph mentioned, the person in high school who is responsible for creating and reviewing IEPs is the learning support teacher. Classroom teachers are responsible for the implementation of the IEPs. And working on an IEP should be a collaboration always between home and school. Early in the year, you'll receive a parent consultation form if your child has an IEP, where you'll be asked for your input. And most importantly, is to remember that it's a working document. The IEP can be updated continually through the year, usually at points where we've gathered new information or families have presented us with new information about a student. Stephanie.
Thanks. Some tips on things you can do before the first day. We recommend going to your grade 8 night at your child's school, meet and ask questions of the staff there, especially if you have someone that you are concerned about. Encourage your child to participate in the visits or opportunities to connect with the staff at the school and also with peers. Review your child's IEP and the IEP transition plan to see what is in that and what you can think of that you may need in the secondary environment or what maybe doesn't need to be there anymore. It's a great time to just reevaluate that. And if you have concerns about transition, check in with your child's grade 8 teacher or the LST and see what they are doing in relation to transitions and brainstorm any next steps. So it's at this time that your next session is actually going to be starting in the next 3 minutes. So we would ask you please to go ahead to your next session. If you have a quick question you need to throw in here, please do go ahead, but we are 3 minutes away from your next session starting. Thank you. Vicky, can you see the numbers?
We're down to 3 people. I'm just going to reply. There's a couple of questions coming up in the chat, in the Q&A.
Okay.
Very welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. So I'm not sure if we should be starting our next session, Steph, should we? Okay. I am seeing in the chat we have a question about accumulating credits in math. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So sorry, everyone. We're just getting a little bit used to the format. I can see our numbers are growing right now. Well, that one, now we just declined one. We might wait just 10 seconds or so to see if anybody else joins, but I think I am learning quickly that we are very tight for time. So just wait a few more seconds. And I am wondering if we should, Stephanie, I'm kind of speaking to you, direct questions to the Q&A might be better, because then we can answer them and they get answered and kind of pulled off the screen. Is that okay with you? Okay.
Yeah, I think that that's fine.
Okay. Okay, I think we're going to get started. So good evening, everyone. My name is Vicki Holen, and I'm here with my colleague, Stephanie King, sorry. We are both secondary learning support consultants for the school board, and it's our job to connect with schools and help support around students who have special education needs. So we'd like to extend a very warm welcome and thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. Our goal is to provide an overview and understanding of spec ed supports available to students within the school board, and to help guide families and caregivers about how to access these in high school. So for some people in the audience, you may have already started on this journey in elementary school, and for others, you may be here because you'd like to be prepared should any issues arise once your child starts high school. We hope that our session today will give you a good basic understanding of where to start when you have concerns, and to help you know who is there to support you with any questions about your child's academic and social emotional learning needs. We invite questions at the end of the session, and we do have both the Q&A and the chat open, so we'll monitor both. But I think maybe if we do direct the questions to the Q&A, and then if we have time, we will try and get some quick answers to you. I just remind you not to go into too much personal detail about your situation, as this is a public forum. Okay, so our first slide. So the first slide, it just helps provide a bit of context. Back one slide. So there we go. Okay, the first slide just helps to provide a bit of context and history for our school board's approach to supporting all students in the district. The OCDSB has a strong commitment to human rights, equity, and inclusion. We believe everyone can succeed in a culture of high expectations when we support the whole child, ensure equity, work together, and listen and honor both student and family and parent caregiver voice. The Learning for All document that you see just the graphic of there on the right is kind of a foundational document in Ontario for all schools, and it paints a really comprehensive picture of spec ed supports across the province. What then school boards do is they build their plan. And so this next slide gets into the special education plan for the OCDSB. This is a publicly available document on the website, which you can access. It basically outlines the philosophy and approach to how we aim to support students with special education needs in all of our schools and all of our programs. Our education system in the OCDSB is based on the principle of inclusion. We offer, however, a range of programs and services with placements ranging from regular class placements with indirect support to specialized program classes to special education schools in our board. Our goal is to help every student meet their full potential in the most inclusive setting possible. And we use a team approach to supporting students, which includes students themselves, parents, caregivers, and school staff. So as we move to the next slide, you'll see a little bit more in a graphic the way we access supports in the board. This slide helps you understand the layers of services and who and where those supports happen. So the first layer of this pyramid is the classroom. So all supports for students begin in the classroom. At this base level, teachers are getting to know their students and observing and monitoring their progress. They build a picture of their students' strengths and needs. The assessment of students is ongoing. And when teachers observe that students are experiencing challenges, they make adjustments to help support them within the classroom. This is what we call differentiation. If classroom level interventions are not seeming to be enough support for a student, and a teacher may reach out to members of the in-school team to help with their input and expertise around how to move forward. Typically, this level of support involves additional assessments and close monitoring of student progress, as different things are being tried and teachers are gathering more and more information. Depending on the needs of the student, support at this school-based level might include things like literacy skill building programs, numeracy programs, social skills programs, just to give you a sense of a few of the interventions that might be tried. Our highest levels of support at the top of the pyramid there involves our central staff teams. So staff in schools will access the support of our central teams through something called a multidisciplinary team meeting. This is where people like our school psychologists, speech pathologists, social workers, and others come together to provide their input about supports for a student who is continuing to experience challenges. It's really important to know that parent consent is always needed to access this level of support. So it should always be the case that you are aware if your child is being brought to the multidisciplinary team for consultation. And on that note, I'd like to say that at every level shown in this diagram, parent and student voice are essential. It's really about good communication and collaboration with the school teams. Now, Stephanie's going to help paint a picture of who's available to support your students' learning needs when they come to high school.
Thanks, Vicki. The special education support in the secondary school, as Vicki mentioned, always starts with the classroom teacher. Those are the people that are on the front line. They're with that student every day. They're going to get to know the student's needs and strengths, communicate and collaborate with the families about successes, challenges, apply best practices to meet the needs of all of their students, know and utilize the IEP in order to support student learning, and when needed, they seek support from the learning support teacher, the multidisciplinary team. From there, the next consult person that we're going to talk about is the learning support teacher, often called the LST. The learning support teacher manages the educational and administrative needs of those students. They set up and attend IPRC meetings for a transition, including any kind of equipment transfers that may be taking place, SIA equipment, for example, specialized seating or desks. Computer equipment does not transport from school to school, but it is noted by the LST in order to make sure it's accessible for the student when they get to high school. IEP consultation and development falls under the LST's job. Monitoring and supporting students within a resource room. If they have support in a resource room, they will get that support from an LST. And also support for accommodations like extra time and scribing happens through the LST. Consult and assist classroom teachers as needed, and they work with administration to organize in-class or resource room support. Other supports within our secondary schools include educational assistants, often referred to as EAs. They work with the classroom teachers to support the planning, organizing, and implementing of behavioral, social, and instructional programming. They assist students with physical, medical, or safety needs in order to allow them to access the curriculum. Guidance counselors, every student within the school has a guidance counselors who will provide counseling for students in the areas of education, career, and any kind of personal guidance or connection to outside services as need be. They can assist with the recommendations and referrals for those outside services through the multidisciplinary team. The student success teacher, often referred to as an SST, is not for all students, but it is for students who are at risk in their credit accumulation. They're having some difficulty getting their credits. Those teachers will help with time management, organization, and general support for those students, as well as tiered support, credit intervention, credit rescue, and credit recovery programs, which are just 3 different ways to try to get a credit that a student is having trouble obtaining. From there, we move to the central team, and all of those centralized supports, you're going to see some of them bolded on here. The ones that are bolded are the ones that attend the multi-D meeting. So when somebody says, we'd like to go to a multidisciplinary team meeting, these are the people that would be in attendance. Professional support staff, we have the psychologist, the social worker, speech language pathologist, board certified behavioral analysis, and occupational therapists. Under the educator supports, we have learning support consultants like Vicki and I And we have a whole array of itinerant teachers. Itinerant teachers include blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, ITATs who do assistive technology, social and emotional learning, ASDDD, learning disability, and inclusion teachers all have itinerants. Support staff, we have an itinerant educational assistants, we have central educational assistants, and we have applied behavioral analysis coordinators. The administrative support includes the superintendent of learning support services, system principals, and a manager.
Okay, so what do you do when you're concerned about your child's learning in high school? The best place to start always is with your child's teacher. In grade 9, students will have up to 8 teachers per year. Most schools will have a meet the teacher night or an open house early in the school year. This is a great opportunity to start the conversations and relationship with your child's teacher. Parent-teacher interviews and other forms of communication, like regular things like email, even Google Classroom weekly updates. A lot of teachers use Google Classroom, and good old telephone calls are also ways to connect and be informed about your child's progress in school. Remember that teachers are the first layer of support for your child's individual education needs. Other staff members who may be able to help support, like Steph just talked about, are the learning support teacher, the guidance counselor, and for some families, the multicultural liaison officer is a crucial support as well. And lastly, there's the administration of the school. So these are the principals and the vice principals. If you think back to the triangle model that we talked about earlier in this presentation, as a child progresses kind of through classroom supports and we start to identify perhaps a higher need of support, then what comes into conversation typically is the need for an individual education plan. This is usually at that next level of support, the middle level, where those conversations would be started. It's not every child who receives an IEP. The next slide is going to go into detail a little bit more about this. So an IEP is a written plan that outlines the supports and strategies and interventions needed by a student to access curriculum. It helps school staff to understand a student's individual strengths and needs. It lists accommodations, including instructional, environmental, and assessment accommodations, which students may require beyond what teachers already embed in their practice. It provides a plan for transitions of all kinds, including, probably most importantly to everyone here tonight, from year to year. So from grade 8 to grade 9, if your child has an IEP, some of that transition planning will be encoded in the IEP under the transition section. Your child's IEP in high school may look a little bit different than it does in elementary school. And that's just the nature of how we provide supports within the high school setting. We rely heavily on accommodations to support our learners as they work on their credits. The person in high school, as Steph said earlier, who is responsible for creating the IEP is the learning support teacher. Classroom teachers are responsible for implementing IEPs. And working on an IEP is always a collaborative effort between home and school. So come next September, when your child's in grade 9, early in the year, usually mid-October, you'll be receiving a parent consultation form, which helps you to structure and provide input into into your child's needs. And you know your child best. So that's one of the ways that we connect in September.
Technical difficulties, sorry about that. So here, what can you do before the first day of school? Go to the grade 8 night at your child's school, meet people, and ask the questions that you want to know about how supports are being provided at that school and how they're going to meet the needs of your son, daughter, loved one. Encourage your child to participate in visits or opportunities to connect with staff at the school. Review the IEP and the IEP transition plan and ensure that the things in it are still relevant. It's a great time to reassess what is needed and not needed in an IEP, and also to make sure that the transition program is going to, process is going to meet your child's needs. If you have concerns about the transition, check in with your child's grade 8 teacher or the LST to see what's being done to assist with that transition and brainstorm any next steps that you think may need to happen. We're right at the end of our presentation currently. I can see that we have a question we're going to try to get to the answer to in the Q&A. If you have also something for the Q&A, go ahead and throw it in. But it is going to be time to get to your next session, which is going to start in 5 minutes. I'm just looking at the question. So there's no way for us to say with certainty. There's a question about that there are no modifications to the program to meet the student's ability, and that they do a lot of supports through extra time, but no changes to the requirement. So we can't, in general, that is a truth. Is that the case for every single student in every single school across the district? I couldn't say that for sure. And it is sometimes surprising in how much a student can be caught up when we look at the overall expectations and meet them where they are and try to get them to where they need to be for that credit. It's a great question. And I think that the person who asked this question probably would love to go to the grade 8 night and ask the LST directly about those concerns that you're having with the concerns about modifications to a student's program. Thanks, everybody. You can get to your next program. That would be great. My mute, unmute button, Vicky, has caught your works doesn't work bug, as has my slide moving.
Oh no. It's like our computers have a mind of their own.
I know, but we have 2 more chances to nail it for the video. So we have 2 minutes to the start of the next one.
And so there aren't breaks in between, so it just goes front to end?
5-minute breaks. So we started at 15 to 35, then we started ours at 40, so now we're 55. Next one starts at 7 to 7:15, and then 7. Yeah, yes, that's right. What you said, or at least I hope that's what's happening, because otherwise.
Okay, so I can see we have about 3 people with us. I think we'll wait just a little bit longer to see if anybody joins, and we'll get started in just a moment.
Perhaps, Vicky, we can direct people to the Q&A for the just throughout, because then we can answer them.
Yeah,
when we're not presenting. Okay.
Yeah. So for those that are in this space, we'll say this again in a minute, but you're welcome to use the Q&A to ask any questions. Feel free to throw those in there at any point. If we can, we'll answer by typed response, or we'll answer live at the end. I would just ask that you keep personal details of your situation out, as this is a public forum. What do you think, Steph? I don't see our numbers increasing. So just get started. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Vicki Holan, and I'm here with my colleague, Steph King. We are both secondary learning support consultants for the OCDSB, which means it's our job to help connect and support schools around their needs for students who may have special education needs. I see our numbers increasing, so I feel like I should stop for a second just to not go too far ahead. First of all, we'd just like to extend a very warm welcome to our session this evening. Our goal is to provide an overview and understanding of special education supports available to students in high school and to help guide families and caregivers about how to access these supports. For some people in the audience, you may have already started on this journey in elementary school, and for others, you may be here because you'd like to be prepared should any issues come up once your child starts high school. We hope that our session today will give you a good basic understanding of where to start when you have concerns about your child's learning, and to help you know who is there to support you with any questions about your child's academic and/or social emotional learning needs. We are, as I said just a moment ago, but now we have new joiners. We'd like to invite you to throw any questions you might have in the Q&A. The chat is also open. We'll try and monitor both. You can throw those questions in at any point, and we'll try and answer as we go, or we'll definitely try and get to them at the end. We would just ask that you don't include personal information, as this is a very public forum. So with that said, let's move on. So our first slide just helps to provide some history and context for our school board's approach to supporting all students in the district. The OCDSB has a strong commitment to human rights, equity, and inclusion. We believe that every student can succeed in a culture of high expectations when they are supported, when we ensure equity, when we work together, and when we listen and value and honor student and caregiver voice. The document that you see there on the screen is a foundational document for special education in Ontario, and it's the document on which all of the school boards across the province base their particular special education plans. So this next slide coming up gets into a little bit more the nitty-gritty of the OCDSB special education plan. It is a public document which exists on the school board's website. It outlines the philosophy and the approach to how we aim to support students with special education needs. So you can access that if you'd like to dive into things a bit deeper, or if you need to revisit some of the language that we're going to introduce to you. So our education system in the OCDSB is based on the principle of inclusion. We do offer a range of programs and services with placement options, including regular class with indirect support, specialized program class placements, and special education schools. Our goal is to help every student meet their full potential in the most inclusive setting possible. We do use a team approach to recognizing and supporting student need, which includes valuing, as I said earlier, the voice of students, parents, and school staff. So again, a big focus on collaboration. Our next slide helps you to understand how the layers of support work within a school, within a high school context, also true in elementary. So for all support for students begins in the classroom. At the base level of this pyramid, you have the classroom level. This is the level at which teachers are getting to know their students as individuals, and they're observing and monitoring their progress. Teachers begin to get a picture of their students' strengths and needs, and assessment of students is ongoing throughout, in the case of most high schools, semesters, in some cases across the full year. When teachers observe that students may be experiencing challenges, they make adjustments to help support the students in their classrooms. This is what we call differentiation. If classroom level interventions are not seeming to be enough for a student to find success, a teacher may reach out to members of what's called the in-school team. This is that next level in the pyramid. So the in-school team will help provide their input and expertise around how to move forward with the student. Typically, this level of support involves additional assessments and close monitoring of student progress as different things are being tried and teachers are gathering more and more information. Depending on the needs of the students, support at the school-based level might include things like literacy skill building programs, numeracy programs, social skills programs, just to give you a sense of a few of the types of things that may be suggested for a student. It's very individual. Our highest level of support for a student involves our central staff teams. So staff in schools will access this level of support, the top of the pyramid, through something called a multidisciplinary team meeting. This is where people like our school psychologists, our speech pathologists, social workers, Steph and myself, and others come together to provide their input and recommendations regarding supports for a student who is continuing to experience challenges, even given the other levels of support already in place. It's very, very important to note that for this level of intervention, parent consent is essential. It's always needed to access this level. And on that note, I'd also like to say that at every level shown in the diagram, parent and student voice are key components. It really is about good communication and collaboration with the school teams. Steph is going to walk you, or is going to help paint a picture of who is available to support your students' learning needs in a little bit greater detail in the next slide.
Thanks, Vicki. So when we look at the special education support available within a secondary school, as Vicki mentioned, it always starts with a classroom teacher. The classroom teacher is going to get to know their students' needs and strengths. They're going to communicate and collaborate with families around challenges and around successes. They're going to apply best practices to meet the needs of all of their students. They're going to know and utilize the IEP to support student learning. And when needed, they're going to seek support from the learning support teacher, the LST, and the multidisciplinary team as needed with parental support. The learning support teacher is that next person who is usually involved. And that person is going to manage the educational and administrative needs of the students. They're going to set up and be involved in the IPRC meetings for transition, and that includes any SIA equipment transfers. So if there's any specialized equipment like chairs or desks, they make sure that that equipment gets transferred to their school. Technology equipment does not get transferred from school to school with few exceptions, and they are just assigned from within the school resources. So if you have technology needs, they have them within the school already. They are going to be involved in the IEP consultation and development. They're going to monitor and support students within a resource room if that is needed, and they're going to make support available for accommodations like extra time or scribing. They consult and work with the classroom teachers as needed, and they work with administration to organize in-class or resource room support to ensure that everything is running when it needs to be. Other supports within the school include the educational assistants, EAs. They work with the classroom teachers in order to support the planning, organizing, and implementing of behavioral, social, and instructional programming. They assist students with physical, medical, and safety needs in order to access the curriculum. Guidance counselors are another form of support. Every student within the school has a guidance counselor. That person will provide counseling to students for education, career, or personal needs. They assist with recommendations and referrals to central and outside agencies through the multidisciplinary team when needed. The student success teacher is another person as a part of that school team, often referred to as the SST. This teacher isn't involved with everybody, but they are involved for individuals who are struggling to get their credits. So they are at risk of their credit accumulation. They help with time management, organizational, and general supports for those students. And they also provide support through credit intervention, credit rescue, and credit recovery programs so that they may be able to get one of the credits that they are having trouble getting. We move from there into our central support. And from the central support team, we have all of the people on the slide who are bolded are people that are part of the multidisciplinary team. And the rest of them are all central and get involved when the multidisciplinary team reaches out because they have a need. So we have professional support staff, psychologists, social workers, speech and language pathologists, board certified behavior analysis, occupational therapist. We have educational supports, learning support consultants like Vicki and a whole slew of itinerant teachers. So we have blind low vision, deaf hard of hearing, assistive technology, often called ITATs, social emotional learning, ASD, LD, learning disabilities, and inclusion teachers who are the itinerant teachers. We have support staff, itinerant educational assistants, central educational assistants, and applied behavioral analysis coordinators. And we have administration support centrally. We have a superintendent of learning support services. We have system principals who oversee all of the supports, and we have a manager who oversees all of the programs. Vicki's going to now start to address what to do if you have concerns.
Sorry, I was trying to answer in the chat and then I got distracted. Okay, so what do you do when you're concerned about your child's learning in high school? The best place to start always is with your child's teacher. In grade 9, students will have up to eight teachers per year. Most schools will have a meet the teacher night or an open house early in the school year, usually in September. I would suggest that this is a great opportunity to start conversations if they haven't already started. Parent-teacher interviews typically happen around report card time, right about now, and other forms of communication like email, Google Classroom weekly updates, a lot of teachers use this platform, are also great ways to be connected and to keep informed about your child's progress in school. Remember that teachers are the first layer of support for your child's individual education needs. Other staff members that are specifically there to help, we've said it a couple of times, are the learning support teacher, the guidance counselors. Another resource that we haven't yet mentioned is the multicultural liaison officer for any of our families who may have a different language than English spoken at home, and the administrative team. So this is our principals and our vice principals. If you think back to the tiered model of support that was earlier in the presentation, when we have students that as the level of support and intervention rises through that pyramid, we start to have conversations about the need for an IEP, to an individual education plan, to help provide and encode accommodations and or programming changes that may need to be made for a student's learning success. So this very next slide is going to go a little bit into detail about the IEP. Some of you might already be familiar with that resource. So the IEP is a written plan that outlines support strategies and interventions needed by a student to access curriculum. It helps school staff to understand a student's individual strengths and needs. It lists accommodations, including instructional, environmental, and assessment accommodations, which students may require beyond what teachers already embed in their classroom practice. It also provides a plan for transitions, including transitions like what we're talking about tonight, from grade 8 to grade 9. And so definitely this is something that you, if your child already has an IEP, this is an area that you might want to look into just to see what is listed there and have conversations if needed with your child's teacher. So the IEP is a working document which can be updated continually throughout the year, although typically we do this as new information arises. Your child's IEP in high school might look a little bit different than it does in elementary school. One of the reasons for this, and this came up in our last session, is in high school, modifications, while possible for a child's program, are relied on, I would say, to far less of an extent than they are in elementary school. And this changes almost the bulk of the IEP. It doesn't mean, though, that a student necessarily will be struggling additionally. It certainly, we're all going to be very aware and paying attention to that. But where we go to first in high school is to look to accommodations and teacher practice around differentiation to help support students. So again, the person in high school who's responsible for the IEP, for creating it and reviewing IEPs, is the learning support teacher. Classroom teachers are responsible for the implementation of the IEPs. And then everyone working together, including families, and in the case of students who are over the age of 16, we look at it as a collaborative approach. So come September next year, you will be getting, in typically mid-September, a parent consultation letter which asks you to provide input into your child's individual education plan. And now we're on to Stephanie.
Thanks, Vicki. Things you can do before the first day. So things we would encourage you to do. Go to your grade 8 night for your child's high school and meet them and ask questions. Meet the LST, ask questions about support, ask questions about how to access technology, about what your child will need to do in order to get the support that they need, or any concerns you have about how things are going to be different. Encourage your child to participate in visits or opportunities to connect with the school staff and also with peers in the school. Start to build some of those connections early. Review your child's IEP and the IEP transition plan. See if there's anything in the IEP that no longer needs to be there. Recognize the things that are really important so that you can ensure that those are the things that get transferred over, and look at the transition plan to see what is going to be in place or what has been discussed as far as how are we going to make that transition from grade 8 to grade 9 a successful one. If you have any concerns about the transition, check in with your child's grade 8 teacher or the learning support teacher at the elementary school to see what is being done for transition and brainstorm any next steps that you think may need to happen in order to make it a successful transition. I think we're going to, at this point, there's a question in the Q&A that we can tackle. So there's a question in the Q&A about how early in the year the Chromebook is available, and can they bring the device to different classes with them, and can they bring it home to get work done? So the Chromebook should be available early in the year. It should be within that first week. You should have access to it. Sometimes it's a little hard to get them all organized for the first day of school, depending on the state that they were in after the board takes them and does everything that they need to do with them over the summer, but they'll be accessible very readily. The process to access them at every school can be a little bit different. And so that's a great question to ask your LST if Chromebook use is one of the ones that services that you're looking for. How does my child get access to the Chromebook? Some schools have a central place they need to go and sign it out. You'll just need to find out from the LST what's the actual process for the school that you're going to. Can they bring the device to different classes? Yeah, some students carry them all day and use them. Some students only use them for certain classes or for certain types of activities. It really does vary depending on the student and what they need and what they are willing to do. It's high school, so there's a lot of self-advocacy that happens in a high school setting, and the students themselves are the ones who are going to go and access that resource. And that sometimes can be a little bit of a learning curve for some students at the very beginning. The question of bringing them home to get work done, I'm going to have to direct that one to you asking the LST and the administration at your school. It isn't a common practice, although it does happen in some circumstances, and the administrator of your school is the one who's going to make that decision based on a number of factors at that school and the resources that they have, as well as the needs of the individual. So that would be a great conversation for your LST/administrator at your high school to have. I'm not seeing any other questions coming up? Okay, we'll keep monitoring it for a second, but you can feel free to make your way into your next presentation.
Okay, hello everyone. We're just, I think, going to get started in a second. Steph, I might have a little bit of audio difficulty. I'm just giving you a warning. So good evening, everyone. My name is Vicki Holland, and I'm here with my colleague, Stephanie King. We are both secondary learning support consultants with the OCDSB. We'd like to extend a very warm welcome to those of you joining us for this session tonight. Our goal is to provide an overview and understanding of special education supports in the school board and to help guide you, families, about how to access these supports for your child in high school. For some people in the audience, you may have already started on this journey in elementary school, and for others, you may be here because you would like to be prepared should any issues come up once your child's high school path has begun. We hope that our session today will give you a good basic understanding of where to start when you have concerns about your child's learning and to help you know who is there to support you with any questions about both academic and or social emotional learning needs. We would welcome questions. We've been using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to throw questions in there as we go. We may not be able to get to them until the end, but at least feel free, like you can pose them. And just make note that we ask that you don't share personal information about your child or your child's situation, given that this is a public forum. Okay, so this first slide just helps provide a bit of context and history to our school board's approach to supporting all students in the district. The OCDSB has a strong commitment to human rights, equity, and inclusion. We believe everyone can succeed in a culture of high expectations when we support the whole child, when we ensure equity, when we work together, and when we listen, honor, and value student and caregiver voice. The Learning for All document that you see there on the screen is a foundational document in Ontario around special education supports for students. And it's one on which every school board bases its system of support. So our next slide gets into a little bit more the nitty-gritty of the OCDSB's model of support for students. And the special education plan is a public document which you can access on the school board's website. It basically outlines the philosophy and approach to how we support students with special education needs in all of our schools and programs. In the OCDSB, our system is based on a principle of inclusion. We do offer a range of programs and services with placement options, including regular class options with indirect support or resource support, and then all ranging through a spectrum of support services like special education program classes and special education schools. Our goal is to help every student meet their full potential in the most inclusive setting possible. And lastly, we use a team approach when looking at how we support students, which includes, the team includes students themselves, parents and caregivers, and school staff. The next slide helps you to understand how the layers of support and services are kind of built up on each other. So all support for students begins in the classroom. At this base level, teachers are getting to know their students and observing and monitoring their process. This is true in elementary school. It's true in high school as well. Teachers begin to get a picture of their students' strengths and needs. They assess ongoing, we call it assessment for, as, and of learning. This is ongoing assessment, continual throughout a semester or across the school year for those full year programs that exist. And when teachers observe that students may be experiencing challenges, they begin to make adjustments to help support the needs of their students in the classroom. This is what we typically call differentiation. If classroom interventions aren't seeming to be enough for a student to find success, a teacher may reach out to members of the in-school support team. This is kind of that middle layer that you see there in the pyramid. So typically this level of support involves additional assessments and close monitoring of student progress as different things are being tried and teachers are gathering even more information about how to meet the needs of their students. Depending on the needs of the individual student, support at the school-based level might include things like literacy skill building programs, numeracy programs, social skill programs, just to give you a sense of what types of things may be suggested for a student. I think for those of you who've traveled down this path already, you'll start to hear and feel like things are similar in high school to elementary school that way. Our highest level of support for students involves the top of the pyramid. So this is where we access support of our central staff teams. Staff in schools, within the schools, they will look to access the central staff resources through something called the multidisciplinary team meeting. This is where people like our school psychologists and speech pathologists, social workers, Stephanie and myself, the learning support consultants, all come together to provide our input and expertise and recommendations regarding supports for a student who continues to struggle despite all of the interventions and support that's been put in place to date. It's very important for you to know that parent consent is an absolute requirement to access this level of support. And on that note, I'd also like to say that every level shown in this diagram, parent and student voice are essential components. It really is about good communication and collaboration with the school teams. Stephanie's going to help paint a picture now of who is available in a little bit greater detail to support your child's learning needs when they come to high school.
Thanks, Vicki. When we're looking at the special education support that exists within a secondary school system, we start with the classroom teacher always. The classroom teacher is the one that's with that student every day, and they are going to get to know their students' needs and strengths. They're going to communicate and collaborate with the families regarding needs and regarding successes. They're going to apply best practices to meet the needs of all of the students in their class. They're going to know and utilize the IEP in order to support student learning. And they're going to seek the support of the learning support teacher and, when needed, the multidisciplinary team to get more resources to help a student who may be struggling within their class. Learning support teachers, often referred to as the LST within a school at secondary, is going to manage the education and administrative needs of the students. They're going to set up and attend the IPRC meetings, including the meetings for transition from grade 8 to grade 9, the one we're looking at tonight. And then they are also going to make sure that the SIA equipment transfers. That SIA equipment would be things like tables and chairs that are specialized to an individual student. It also could be technology, most of which doesn't transfer from school to school. Each school has a bank of them already accessible for the student to access when they get there. They're going to have consultations, and they are going to develop the IEP. They're going to monitor and support students within the resource room for those students who need to utilize a resource environment. And they are going to provide all the supports necessary for accommodations like extra time or scribing. They consult and assist classroom teachers as needed to help meet the needs of the individual students. And they work with administration to organize in-class and resource room support in order to make sure that the classes and the students who need the support are getting the support that we have within the school assigned in an equitable way. Some of the other in-school supports include educational assistants, often called EAs. They're going to work with the classroom teachers to support the planning, organizing, and implementing of behavioral, social, and instructional programming. They assist students with physical, medical, and safety needs in order to allow them to access the curriculum. Every student in the school has a guidance counselor. That guidance counselor can provide counseling in the areas of education. What are we going to do as far as, do I want to go to college or university or some other program or private program after school? Career counseling, as well as help with managing personal challenges that may arise in that student's life. They also assist with recommendations and referrals to central and outside services through the multidisciplinary team as needed. The student success teachers, they're often called SSTs. They're not for every student. Not every student is involved with an SST, but they are for the students who are at risk of getting their credit accumulations happening in a timely way. So they're going to help with time management and organization for those students, as well as general support for those students. And they're also going to provide credit intervention, credit rescue, and credit recovery programs, which is just a way for them to try to get credits that may be at risk of not being accumulated. We move to the central support. So these are the teams that we have centrally, and these people would be called in to support or are part of the management system that helps for learning support services for the whole board. The ones that are in bold and that we've talked about earlier are the ones that are sitting in on multidisciplinary team meetings. So they are at the table when we have a recommendation and approval to talk about a student in order to help figure out how to best meet their needs. So professional support staff includes psychologists and social workers, speech language pathologists, board certified behavior analysts, and occupational therapists. We have educator supports, learning support consultants. We have itinerant teachers, a variety of different ones, including blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, assistive technology, often called ITATs, social emotional learning, ASDDD, learning disabilities, and inclusion teachers. We have support staff centrally, itinerant educational assistants, central educational assistants, and applied behavioral analysis coordinator. And we have administration support, the superintendent of learning support services, the system principals, and the manager of learning support services all work together to overlook and oversee all of the special education needs within our board. Vicki is now going to address a little bit about, you have concerns, where can you start?
Thanks, Steph. Okay. So the best place to start when you have concerns is with your child's teacher. In grade 9, students will have up to 8 teachers per year. Most schools will have a meet the teacher night or an open house early in the school year, and I'd suggest this is a great place to start conversations if you haven't already done that through transition meetings. Parent-teacher interviews are also another avenue for making that connection and for discussing your child's progress, although we all know that those are fairly short meetings. But they are definitely also encouraged in terms of just building that communication, that relationship. And then there's things just like email, Google Classroom weekly updates. Lots of teachers use Google Classroom in high school as a platform. And regular telephone calls when you need to connect. So keeping informed about your child's progress is what is essential, and just starting that communication with the teacher. They are the first layer of support for your child's individual education needs. And like we've already just highlighted, other staff are there to help as well. The LST, the guidance counselor. We haven't mentioned the multicultural liaison officer, but for our families who may have primary language other than English, this is a really important resource as well. And lastly, the administrators of the school. So if ever you feel like you've tried, let's say, to reach out to the teacher, you haven't heard back, you should feel like you can reach out to others within the building that are able to help support you as well. When we think back to the pyramid of support that we looked at earlier in this presentation, as a student's needs kind of progress up through those levels of support, so they go beyond the classroom, one of the things that might start to be talked about, and for some families here, this might already be in place for your child within elementary school, but the thing I'm talking about is the individual education plan. So this is a document. We're going to split to the next slide. This is the IEP, the Individual Education Plan, is a written plan that outlines the support strategies and interventions needed by a student to access curriculum. It helps school staff to understand an individual student's learning strengths and needs. And it encodes a list of accommodations that are based on instruction, environmental accommodations, and assessment accommodations, which some students require in order to access curriculum beyond what is already provided in the classroom. I'd like to just note here that a lot of accommodations are becoming very common practice within the classroom. So really we're looking at above and beyond what teachers can already support. This is when we might start to think about an IEP. The IEP also provides a plan for transitions of all kinds, including what we're talking about here tonight. So from year to year, school to school. And the IEP is a working document which can be updated continually throughout the year as new information is gathered. Perhaps that's gathered at school, or perhaps it's gathered through families' own access to assessments or various things that families do access in the community. You might find that your child's IEP in high school looks a little bit different than it does in elementary school. And this is typically reflective of in elementary school, there are often schools will modify students more regularly than it happens at high school. It does happen, but on far rarer occasions. Students primarily are supported through accommodations and what we would call differentiation practices within the classroom. So the person in high school who is responsible for creating and reviewing IEPs, Steph has mentioned it, I'm going to mention it again, it's the learning support teacher. This is different from elementary school, where typically it's the classroom teacher driving that. Instead, at high school, classroom teachers are responsible for accessing and implementing a student's IEP. Working on an IEP should be a collaborative effort always between home and school. And what you can expect is that come September of next year, when your student enters grade 9, probably about midway through, you'll receive home, if your child has an IEP already, a parent consultation form, which asks you to provide input to help the school team develop your child's IEP for high school. And now on to our last slide with Stephanie King.
Thanks, Vicki. So this slide, we're going to talk about what can you do before the first day of school to feel like you're prepared for this big transition. I would encourage you to go to your grade 8 night at your child's school and meet the staff. Look around the school, get a feel for what it's like there, and ask questions. Meet the LST, ask them questions about what kinds of support you are looking for, or what your child may need, and how they may be able to meet those needs, how they can access technology if they need it. Whatever the case may be for your son or daughter, go ahead and ask those questions. Encourage your child to participate in the visits or opportunities to connect with staff at the school, as well as with peers at the school, to start to build some of those connections early. Feel more comfortable when you walk in the first day. Review your child's IEP and the IEP transition plan. This is a great time. It's a huge transition to just really look at the IEP and think about, is everything in here still needed? Is it exactly the way that I would like it to be? Are there things that don't need to be there anymore? Is anything missing? And you can look at the transition plan to see what is in there as far as how are we going to make this transition, or what does my son or daughter need when they're making transitions, and is it in there? The transition plan can cover the grade 8 to grade 9 transition, but it can also cover strategies that need to be in place in order for someone to transition from room to room, from class to class, from activity to activity. So it's a great time to review those. If you have any concerns about the transition coming up, check in with your child's grade 8 teacher and the LST at your elementary school and see what they are doing as far as transition is concerned, what information is being passed on, what you can do to support that transition, and brainstorm any next steps that you may need to take. I know that for some students, it's about getting in the building a little more often to feel comfortable, and for others, it's just about making sure that the accommodations or the technology that need to be there are in place for that individual. We have a couple of questions in the chat. So the first question, Vicky, was about sharing a copy of the presentation. Are you comfortable with that? I'm not sure if they're sharing them centrally.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't sure if they were sharing them centrally, so I'm good with that. Do you want me to put that in the chat?
Yeah, if you don't mind placing it in the
Yeah,
chat,
I'll
I
do
just
that.
wanted to check with you first. And then the second one we have is about somebody who is attending high school. They want to know if there's a safe, calm space available that supports kids who need to decompress if needed. And every school finds a way to meet the needs of the students within their school, and it may look different from school to school. So some may have a dedicated room that they utilize for a calm or a sensory room, a decompression room, a safe space. Other ones have that space within the resource room. And for some schools, they will find ways to meet that need through the person that the student connects with within the school or in other spaces within the school. The important thing, maybe from my perspective, is not necessarily is there a room, but how will that need get met for that person in this school? So it might be that it's going to be at different rooms at different places in the day, depending on their schedule. If I think of a school that's 4 floors high, maybe you don't want to have to go 4 floors down to get to that space, and you need a space on every floor. All of those kinds of things are discussions to have with your LST, your classroom teachers, and the administrators at the school, but they will for sure figure out a way to find a space for them to decompress, whatever that might look like at your individual school. I'm just seeing here, we don't have any other questions. We are at the end of our time today. We'll stay on here for a minute. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and pop them into the Q&A. Otherwise, we hope we found it useful and that you got some good information tonight at all of your sessions. Thank you.
And I did add the presentation into the chat if you haven't seen that already, so you can access it there. I am just checking. So I see the question coming up. I do not see the presentation. You'll, if you look down to the chat function at the bottom of your screen, if you open that up, you should be able to see it. Maybe if you could just let me know if you find it. And if not, I will try and figure that out. I hope that person is still there. It is now in the chat. That was my fault. I didn't realize my messages were not set to everyone. You're welcome.
All right.